So our bodies are something we don't usually consider. It's not something that's very frequently or heavily philosophized. Usually philosophy relates to the workings of the mind, but in everyday social discourse we kind of forget that we are animals in bodies and that we are always inhabiting a body. Like there's never been a time since we were born till right now that we've been outside of our body as if we were acting and operating outside of it. We are always embodied in our lived experiences. We're never just these floating brains communicating with each other telepathically, mind to mind. We're always embodied in a situation, especially very common everyday life situations that we find ourselves in every day, because those are the situations where your mind kind of goes on autopilot and your body takes over. And you go through the motions as if by muscle memory and do everything as if your body is just in charge in those moments. And like I said, we don't really think about it. We're not as self aware with regards to our bodies and the fact that we are always with them and in them. So, if you can't think of anything to talk about as an example for your reflection this week, maybe you're not really into fashion or physical activity, you can just think and talk about what it's like to be in a body. You have experience with that, and you could apply that by doing a mindfulness meditation session that SFU offers. There are these free Zoom sessions offered 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I wasn't kidding about doing those. They're super helpful to practice clearing the mind, and I partake in those online sessions whenever I can. They teach you to just take a minute out of your day and be present in your body and contemplate on the fact that you're breathing right now and your heart is beating and your spine is keeping you upright and your feet are planted on the ground, and all these things we don't usually think about. Like, we're very much disembodied in our everyday lives. We just tend to think of ourselves as brains floating in a tank, but we're much more than that. So I'm going to share with you guys a link in the comments section of this lecture for not only the mindfulness meditation sessions, if you can attend one of those and then reflect on it. Some of those sessions deal more with the mind than the body, but I'll also link a page of recordings from SFU Health and Counseling Services. One of them is a meditative exercise called a body scan that takes about 10 to 15 minutes, in which you get into a relaxed state and follow the guided audio instructions and focus on each of your body parts one by one, from the tips of your toes all the way up to the top of your skull. And you kind of develop that mind body connection and develop an appreciation for the fact that you have all these different body parts and are one with them and they're one with you. Whereas, as we'll get to, that concept has kind of been severed in our modern thinking of the mind-body relationship. The body has kind of been alienated from the mind, even though they're very much one. So, like I said, we're always embodied. We are always in our bodies, and everything we experience, everything we think about, is first filtered through our bodies in order to get your mind, to get to your mind and to reach your mind and then become our thoughts and conceptions. So your eyes, ears, mouth, nose, and all these things through which we sense the world, our sensory faculties with which we perceive the world, are part of our bodies first and foremost. It's not like everything in the sensory world just hits our mind untainted and unfiltered. It's first filtered through our sensory faculties, which are inherent to our body. And the specificity and the uniqueness of each of our bodies will play a large part in shaping how we perceive the world and how we think about the world and our relationship to the world. For example, your physical height will literally shape how you see the world. People of varying heights see the world from drastically different perspectives, and that can shape their personality to some degree. You may have heard of the Napoleon complex, where smaller people try to compensate by consolidating more power. And such a mental complex wouldn't exist if it weren't for the physical body that that person is inhabiting. I'm personally a gentleman of more diminutive stature, a GDS, as we're called in the height community. And I think my short height growing up shaped my personality in that my experiences over time as being the little guy and the underdog from this specific embodied vantage point of mine have taught me not to take things so seriously and to find humor in the little things in life. If I grew up in a completely different body, let's say I was really tall, I don't think my personality would be as humorous. I may be a more serious fellow, a TSF, a tall, serious fellow who knows what else would be different in my life experiences in that body in terms of how others view me and treat me over the course of my life and how I come to view myself that would then shape fundamental aspects of my mindset and my personality. It's through our bodies that we not only receive the world and perceive the world, it's also through our bodies that we speak and act and physically and thus meaningfully navigate and exist in the world. And again, all the specificities of each of our bodies determine the mental aspects. Another example, maybe you don't like your own voice. Maybe you don't like the way your voice sounds. That's a physical, biological characteristic shaped by your body, in this case, your vocal cords. And that physical aspect of your body may make you more shy or reticent to interact with the world and put yourself out there or speak in public. So that's another aspect where your physical body is shaping and determining how you conduct yourself mentally in terms of your personality and ways of thinking and being that you're disposed to. So we need to give the body more credit for the fundamental role it plays in our everyday lives and how it precedes our conscious thought. Another example of this is how, for me personally, I don't have great eyesight. My eyes are a bit deteriorated and don't allow me to see much, so I need contact lenses, which I'm wearing now, or glasses. And if it weren't for those enhancements, those external enhancements of my limited internal bodily capacities, in this case my eyes, I wouldn't be able to see all of the world. And then how would that change my thinking of the world if I couldn't see something, I couldn't perceive it and then make conceptions about it? It's going to drastically limit the things I could think about and talk about and just my ways of being in the world. I would be a completely different person if I were to have a different body. You can take my exact mind and transplant it into a different body, but that different body is going to lend itself to different lived experiences and different ways of seeing the world and interacting with it. So our bodies shape our minds just as much as our minds shape our body. There's a lot of intra-personal communication happening between them. So similar to the week on dreams, where dreams are seen as a mode of intra-personal communication between layers within the self, the unconscious and the conscious layers of our being, the body and the mind also communicate with each other at the intra-personal level, not the interpersonal level, not between people, but within a person. It's communication between the physical/biological levels of ourselves and the mental/social levels of ourselves or layers of ourselves. And just as there's a two-way street between the conscious and the unconscious and how they reciprocally affect each other, it's the same thing with the mind and the body. They can affect each other reciprocally. So your mind could have the idea that I'm going to binge eat a bunch of chocolate because I want to, and it's going to satisfy my mind's cravings. And then that'll affect the body. It could cause the body to gain weight or feel some digestive stress, all sorts of physical effects experienced at the bodily level as a result of the mind's actions and decisions. So that decision may feel good for the mind at the time. It could give the mind comfort, but then the body is going to have to face the consequences of that decision. And inversely, the body can cause mental effects by, for example, flooding the brain with a bunch of serotonin and feel good chemicals whenever the mind thinks about a certain thing. So in this case, the body is rewarding the mind for its thought patterns, and that can cause a positive reinforcement that provokes the mind to think about that certain thing that the body rewards it for more often, which is the reason for things like daydreaming and fantasizing. You think in those moments that you're lost in your head, but you could say you're actually lost in your body because the body is the thing that's producing those feel good chemicals that make it feel good for your mind to just get lost in wandering in daydreams. So that's a case that reverses the direction of intrapersonal communication within an individual, as the body and physical layers of the self are determining and structuring and influencing our thinking patterns based on how our bodies are rewarding or punishing and thus driving much of the brain's activities and choices. So even though there are various ways of conceiving the body and philosophizing the body, as we'll get to, no matter how you really look at it, it does play a fundamental role in our everyday life. It's the sensory apparatus through which we receive the world, but it's also the medium of expression and the vehicle through which we communicate with the world and exist in it physically. The body is really the mediator between your internal minds and the external world. It's the medium, it's the membrane, it's the layer between you and everything that's not you, everything that exists outside of you. Your body is the bag that contains the contents of you as you navigate this world. But it's strange how, especially in modern society, we easily forget about our bodies and we just don't think about them. I'd wager to guess that it's largely because of the digitized and digitally mediated nature of our current everyday existence and interactions that a lot of times may cause us to feel like we are just a brain with a pair of eyes for looking at a computer screen and a pair of hands for typing on a keyboard, neglecting everything else about our bodies, such as our posture, which suffers a lot in this computer mediated setting, and simple things like the ability to go for a walk and like use our legs or smell some flowers and use our olfactory senses. And we forget even further that we're all just animals in bodies, especially when we see the disembodied words of other people online, such as on emails or Twitter or other social media. Just seeing the words on a screen doesn't capture the fact that those words and the person from which they originated are originating from someone in a body. So much of our existence now is mediated that we forget the fact that our bodies are the original media, the ones mediating our inner minds and our outer social worlds. So many of our digital interactions and our online interactions seek to erase the body from consideration and disembody us. So that, let's say you have a thought, it flows through your body as you type that thought out onto a keyboard and give it form in the social world. But then those thoughts are once again disembodied as they now belong more to the computer screen on which you typed it rather than belonging to the body and its own capacity for self-expression. So you see the words of others online and associate them immediately, like the word immediately is like without mediation, without mediator. You forget that those words were originally mediated by the person's body because they couldn't just telepathically send those words to the screen. It had to come from their fingers in a tactile manner to then go through the keyboard and onto the screen and reach you online. They first need to be typed and spoken by a body and through a body. And of course, we can't forget there's always the question of power. Our bodies, just like our minds, are a constant intersection of power relations. The way that power relations play themselves out is through our bodies all the time. In an early lecture, I gave you an example of following traffic rules when you're driving and following them almost seamlessly and without anyone having to directly intervene to conduct your conduct. You're conducting your own conduct while driving. Well, this isn't accomplished purely mentally. Like, yes, you need your mind to recognize and interpret the signs around you, such as green lights and stop signs and car horns honking, but you perceive those things through your body, such as your eyes and your neck and your shoulders, for looking around your field of vision and checking for blind spots and whatnot. But it's also through your body that you act in relation to those signs, such as using your hands to steer the steering wheel or pushing your foot on the gas pedal to varying degrees of intensity to alter your car's speed to follow those rules. All of the disciplinary and discursive power is acted upon the body, and it's through the body that they bear their effects on everyday conduct. So where the body goes, the mind follows. Like we mentioned with the disciplinary power in prisons, and how those habits of discipline are drilled into the body of the inmates, their actions and their behaviors and their habits, where they're allowed to move within the prison and how they're allowed to do so. It all acts on the body and operates on the body. So just as discourse is a site of struggle, our bodies and our experiences of our body are discursively constructed so that our bodies are also a site of social struggle in terms of the power that's wielded on us and acted upon us and through us, as well as our reciprocal struggle to define the meanings of our bodies and the usage of our bodies to both ourselves and to others around us. So bodies are signifiers with their own meanings, and different bodies, such as male bodies, female bodies, black or white bodies, able bodies or disabled bodies, are organized in our society according to power-laden binary oppositions inherent to the structure of our language that try to classify this phenomenon that is our bodies, and trying to pigeonhole and constrain the multiplicitous meanings of our bodies that don't always fit into these rigid and over-rationalized categories that are constructed in discourse.